the dimly lit corridors of one of the nation's most formidable prisons, a story of rivalry, power, and survival unfolds, a story that remains largely untold. At the heart of this narrative are two men, Eddie Clark and Reggie Cole, each carrying the weight of their pasts into a confrontation that would etch their names into the annals of prison legend. Eddie, with eyes that have seen the depths of human depravity, holds a presence that commands respect and fear in equal measure. Reggie, on the other hand, carries a quiet intensity, a storm brewing beneath a calm exterior. Their paths, shaped by choices and circumstances, are on a collision course, the outcome of which is uncertain, but inevitably life-changing. This is not just a tale of a showdown. It is a journey through the complex web of prison politics, the silent codes that govern life behind bars, and the unspoken bonds that form in the most unlikely of places. It is about the making of legends in a world where every day is a battle for survival, where reputations are currency, and where the line between right and wrong blurs. As we delve into the histories of Eddie and Reggie, we uncover not just the events leading up to their fateful encounter, but the essence of what drives a man in the unforgiving world of incarceration. What emerges is a gripping saga of resilience, ambition, and the indomitable human spirit. Through their story, we explore the mysteries of human nature, the quest for power, and the longing for redemption. Join us as we venture into the heart of darkness, where every shadow tells a story, and every scar is a testament to survival. The untold story of Eddie Clark and Reggie Cole is more than a recounting of events. It is a powerful reminder of the complexities of the human condition, the thin line between control and chaos, and the unseen battles that rage behind prison walls. Eddie Clark's journey to infamy began on the unforgiving streets of a neighborhood where the law of the jungle prevailed over the rule of law. Born into a world where survival often meant bending or breaking the rules, Eddie learned early on that respect was more valuable than currency. His childhood, marked by scarcity and strife, was a crucible that forged him into a man who valued power and loyalty above all. His entry into the criminal world was not a matter of if, but when. By his teenage years, Eddie was already known on the streets for his ruthlessness and strategic mind. However, it was inside the walls of the United States prison system that Eddie Clark would transform from a street-level enforcer into a legend. Within months of his incarceration, Eddie had already begun to make his mark. His natural leadership abilities, combined with a cold, analytical approach to problem-solving, made him a figure of both admiration and fear among inmates. He navigated the complex social hierarchies of prison life with a blend of diplomacy and aggression, knowing when to extend a hand and when to clench a fist. Eddie's reputation grew with each calculated move, from establishing control over key contraband routes to brokering peace between warring factions. His influence was not limited to his fellow inmates. Even guards were wary of crossing him, recognizing the power he wielded within the confines of the prison. But it was not merely his strategic mind that set Eddie apart. Stories of his acts of loyalty and moments of unexpected kindness towards those in his circle added layers to his legend, making him a figure of complex morality. To some, he was a ruthless leader, a kingpin of the incarcerated world. To others, he was a protector, a beacon of stability in a world of chaos. As Eddie's influence expanded, so did the tales of his exploits. He became a living legend, a symbol of how far one could rise within the system that was designed to suppress. Yet with great power comes great scrutiny, and Eddie's ascent caught the attention of not only the prison administration, but also other ambitious inmates. Among them was Reggie Cole, a man with his own complicated past and ambitions, setting the stage for a showdown that would be talked about for years to come. In Eddie Clark, the prison system saw a formidable inmate, one who could challenge its authority. But Eddie saw himself as something more, a man who, against all odds, forged his own destiny within the iron bars that sought to contain him. Reggie Cole's path to the fateful encounter with Eddie Clark was paved with hardship and desperation, a journey marked by personal loss and the pursuit of survival in a world that seemed stacked against him from the start. Born into a family caught in the cycle of poverty and crime, Reggie was no stranger to adversity. His childhood was a tapestry of moments filled with fleeting joys, overshadowed by the constant presence of violence and scarcity. Unlike Eddie, whose reputation was built on strategic dominance and a certain moral complexity, Reggie's entrance into the criminal world was driven more by necessity than ambition. His crimes were initially small, born out of the need to provide for his family in the absence of any legitimate means. However, the unforgiving nature of street life, combined with a series of personal betrayals, hardened Reggie's heart and propelled him deeper into a life of crime. Reggie's transition from the streets to the prison system was abrupt but unsurprising. His reputation preceded him, yet he lacked the strategic foresight and alliances that Eddie had. Instead, Reggie's strength lay in his resilience, his ability to endure and adapt. This resilience caught the eye of various factions within the prison, and soon, Reggie found himself navigating the treacherous waters of prison politics. His encounters with Eddie Clark were initially sporadic, two orbiting stars in the vast universe of the prison system. However, as Reggie's influence grew, so did the frequency of their interactions. These encounters were marked by a mutual recognition of each other's strength and resilience, yet underpinned by an unspoken rivalry. Reggie, with his raw survival instinct, and Eddie, with his calculated approach to power, found themselves increasingly at odds, their respective ambitions setting them on a collision course. The dynamics of their relationship before the escalation were complex. There were moments of tentative alliance where mutual interests aligned, but these were fleeting. The underlying tension between them was palpable, a silent acknowledgement that their paths, so divergent in their origins, were destined to clash in a struggle for dominance. Reggie's alliances within the prison were varied, often shifting based on the volatile dynamics of prison life. His ability to survive and maintain influence without a solid base of power like Eddie's spoke volumes about his adaptability and the respect he commanded. Yet, this lack of a stable foundation made his position precarious, his path fraught with challenges that tested his resolve and his very identity. As the narrative unfolds, the inevitability of their showdown looms large, a culmination of years of underlying tension, competing ambitions, and the brutal politics of prison life. Reggie Cole, a man molded by hardship and survival, was now on a trajectory that would pit him against Eddie Clark, setting the stage for a confrontation that would forever alter the course of their lives. In the confines of a world ruled by unspoken codes and iron-fisted hierarchies, the tension between Eddie Clark and Reggie Cole simmered beneath the surface, a volatile undercurrent threatening to erupt. The prison, a microcosm of power struggles and fleeting allegiances, became the stage for a drama that would unfold with tragic inevitability. The tipping point, when it came, was a confluence of factors that transformed their rivalry from a Cold War into an open conflict. The catalyst for their final showdown was not a single event, but a series of escalations that highlighted the fragile balance of power within the prison walls. A disputed control over a contraband supply line became the spark that ignited the powder keg. For Eddie, it was a challenge to his authority and control. For Reggie, it was a matter of survival, a chance to solidify his standing and prove his resilience against the odds. As the dispute grew, so did the involvement of other inmates and factions within the prison. Some saw an opportunity to elevate their own status by aligning with one side or the other, while others sought to exploit the conflict for their own gain. The prison staff, aware but often indifferent to the undercurrents of inmate politics, found themselves caught between maintaining order and unwittingly facilitating the escalation through their actions or inactions. The psychology of both men was tested as the showdown loomed. Eddie, always the strategist, saw the conflict as a chess game, each move calculated with precision, each decision weighed against its potential impact on his empire. Reggie, driven by instinct and a deep-seated need to assert his place in the world, approached the situation with a mix of caution and boldness. Their internal struggles mirrored the external conflict, a battle not just for control, but for identity and legacy. As the day of the showdown approached, the prison became a pressure cooker of anticipation and anxiety. Inmates and guards alike sensed the impending storm, a palpable tension that permeated the air. Rumors and whispers filled the halls, each iteration adding to the mythology of what was to come. The role of other inmates became crucial, as alliances were tested and loyalties questioned. Some sought to mediate, hoping to avert disaster, while others fanned the flames. eager to see the giants clash. The psychological warfare between Eddie and Reggie reached its zenith, each man trying to outmaneuver the other, not just physically, but mentally. The strategies they employed were as much about demoralizing the opponent as they were about tactical advantage. This psychological chess match set the stage for a confrontation that was as much about the minds of the men involved as it was about their actions. As the final pieces fell into place, the prison braced for an event that would mark a before and after in its history. The showdown between Eddie Clark and Reggie Cole was not just a fight for dominance. It was a culmination of years of rivalry, a moment that would define not just the victors and the vanquished, but the very fabric of life within the prison walls. In the year 2000, on a day that seemed ordinary, yet was destined to be marked by unforeseen turmoil, Reggie found himself meandering through the expansive outer yard of the prison that had become his reluctant home. The sun bore down with an intensity that seemed to mirror the simmering tensions within the prison walls, casting long shadows that moved like silent specters across the concrete. As Reggie navigated the yard, his steps carrying him with a listlessness born of routine, his senses abruptly sharpened. The air felt heavier, charged with a palpable intensity. It was then he saw Eddie advancing towards him. Unlike the others who might attempt a stealthy approach, Eddie made no such pretenses. His stride was deliberate, a predator confidently closing in on what he deemed his next prey. Reggie, caught in the unsettling realization that he was the target of this unwanted attention, felt a cold shiver trail down his spine. Panic fluttered in his chest. An unwelcome visitor he tried to quash as Eddie's presence loomed ever closer. He wasn't just another inmate. Eddie was a legend within these walls, a man whose reputation was built on a foundation of fear and brutality. As Eddie stopped in front of him, Reggie could only stare, frozen, as the man reached out. A firm grip on his shoulder with one hand was quickly followed by a sharp pain at his waist, a stab, swift and precise. This wasn't a fatal blow, but the message it conveyed was clear and terrifying. Reggie's days in this prison were numbered. Eddie withdrew the knife with a casual cruelty, tossing it into the nearby grass as if discarding an insignificant tool. Reggie, grappling with the shock and the sharp sting of his wound, felt a warm trickle of blood. He pressed his hand against the injury, an instinctive attempt to stem the flow, but his mind was racing. The surrounding prisoners, witnesses to this chilling display, offered no aid, their gazes sliding away, expressions blank. Fear had rendered them silent, complicit in their inaction. Even the guards, those tasked with maintaining order, seemed to turn a blind eye. It was as if the entire yard had collectively decided to ignore the gravity of what had just occurred. Reggie, despite the pain and the betrayal of silence around him, knew he had to act. Desperation lent him clarity as the bell rang, signaling the end of the break. This was not just a physical wound. It was a stark reminder of the lawlessness that pervaded the prison, a place where might often stood in for right. As the prisoners lined up for the routine search before returning to their cells, Reggie found himself just a few places behind Eddie in the queue. The search was a mere formality, a dance everyone performed in the hope of maintaining some semblance of control. Yet as Reggie stood there, applying pressure to his wound in a futile attempt to appear unharmed, he harbored a secret deeper than the physical cut he had received. Buried in the yard was a knife, one Reggie had hidden away for a moment just like this. With a resolve hardened by pain and the desire for survival, he had retrieved the knife before lining up, its cold weight a stark contrast to the warm blood seeping through his clothes. Eddie, unaware of the shift in fate, continued to wear a look of contempt, his smile a twisted symbol of his perceived invincibility. As the search progressed, Reggie made a decision. In a moment fueled by a mix of fear, anger, and a desperate desire for retribution, he stepped out of the line. His actions were swift, propelled by the need to end the cycle of intimidation he had been subjected to. The knife, once hidden, now became an instrument of his defiance as he drove it into Eddie's throat. The yard fell into a stunned silence, the violence of the act shocking even in a place accustomed to brutality. Eddie's eyes, wide with shock, quickly filled with pain as he attempted to stem the flow of blood, a futile gesture that only highlighted his vulnerability. The fall was swift, Eddie's imposing figure collapsing onto the ground as chaos threatened to erupt around them. Reggie, recognizing the gravity of what he had done, surrendered, laying on the ground with his hands above his head. His voice, loud in the sudden silence, carried a weight of resignation and defiance. "I know what I did," he shouted, a declaration that was both an admission of guilt and a plea for understanding. The prison, a place no stranger to violence, was suddenly thrust into a state of heightened alert. The death of Eddie, a figure who had ruled through fear and power, threatened to unravel the fragile order that had been maintained through a balance of terror and compliance. The guards, now mobilized by the sudden shift in the prison's dynamics, moved swiftly to contain the situation, their previous inaction replaced by urgent activity. Reggie, once just another inmate struggling to survive the daily perils of prison life, now found himself at the center of a storm. His act of defiance, though born out of desperation and a desire for self-preservation, had propelled him into uncharted territory. The implications of his actions were immediate and dire. Arrested and placed in solitary confinement, the silence of his cell was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded in the yard. As the night wore on, the prison remained in a state of lockdown. The usual sounds of clandestine activity and whispered conversations were replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by the occasional footsteps of guards making their rounds. The death of Eddie, while bringing a temporary sense of vindication to some, also brought with it a wave of uncertainty. The power vacuum left in his wake was a source of tension, a simmering pot that threatened to boil over at the slightest provocation. Reggie, isolated in his cell, had time to reflect on the gravity of his situation. The second murder charge that now hung over him was a heavy weight, one that carried the grim possibility of execution. The reality of his circumstances was inescapable. Though the act could be argued as self-defense, the rules of the outside world held little sway within the prison walls. The witnesses to his act, the very same inmates who had turned their gaze away when Eddie had targeted him, were now potential jurors in the court of prison justice. In the cold light of day, as Reggie awaited his fate, the options before him seemed bleak. The best-case scenario, a successful plea of self-defense, still carried a sentence that would see him spend the next decade in solitary confinement. It was a prospect that chilled him to the bone. The thought of enduring years in the suffocating silence of isolation was almost as daunting as the threat of execution. Yet, in the depths of his despair, Reggie couldn't help but reflect on the paths that had led him to this moment. The series of choices and circumstances that had woven together to form the fabric of his current reality. The prison, with its unspoken rules and brutal hierarchies, was a world unto itself, a place where survival often required sacrifices that, in any other context, would be unthinkable. As the days passed, and Reggie awaited the decision that would seal his fate, the prison slowly returned to its usual rhythms. The power struggles that had been momentarily paused in the wake of Eddie's death resumed with renewed vigor, as various factions vied for control. Yet, amidst the tension and the turmoil, there was a palpable shift in the air. Reggie's act, though desperate, had shattered the illusion of invincibility that had surrounded Eddie. It was a reminder that, even in a place as unforgiving as the prison, change was possible. Reggie, now a figure of both notoriety and intrigue, found himself at a crossroads. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, but it was also lined with the faint glimmer of hope. Hope that his story, marked by violence and redemption, might serve as a catalyst for change. As he faced the prospect of years in isolation, Reggie clung to this hope, a beacon in the darkness that reminded him of the resilience of the human spirit. Amidst a future shrouded in uncertainty, Reggie faced a pivotal moment when presented with a selection of state-appointed lawyers, all willing to defend him at no cost. Disinterestedly, he chose one at random, Christopher Blort, believing the outcome was predetermined. However, this choice would lead to an unexpected twist in his fate, as Christopher unearthed revelations that could overturn everything. The journey began as Christopher dove into the case files that led to Reggie's incarceration, the 1994 murder outside an illicit establishment. The victim, a 29-year-old named Felipe Gonzalez, met his demise under mysterious circumstances. Arriving at the scene, two officers quickly zeroed in on the brothel's manager, John Jones, for interrogation, under the assumption that brothel's illegality made him a suspect. John Jones, from his vantage point on the brothel's second floor, claimed to have witnessed the entire incident. According to him, after being denied entry, Gonzalez was confronted by 3 gang-affiliated teenagers demanding money. Unable to communicate in English, Gonzalez was fatally shot as he returned to his car, the perpetrators fleeing into the night. One detail stood out to Jones: a noticeable limp in one of the assailants, suggesting an injury. This was the first major case for the leading officer, who drew a connection between the limp and Reggie, a local gang member with a similar injury. Despite Reggie's protests of innocence, the circumstantial evidence was enough for a conviction. Christopher's persistence in re-examining the case files paid off 3 years later. He demonstrated through scientific analysis that the trajectory of the bullets indicated a shooter positioned significantly above street level, contrary to Jones's account. This revelation, combined with the absence of any direct evidence linking Reggie to the scene, cast doubt on the initial findings. Further investigation revealed that Jones's testimony was coerced, offered in exchange for leniency towards his illegal operation. Moreover, the injury used to implicate Reggie predated the murder by several years, a fact ignored by authorities eager for a quick resolution. Reggie's time in prison was marked by a determined effort to understand the legal system, despite the shadow of false accusations. Even after defending himself in a separate incident that led to solitary confinement, his hope for justice persisted. The case's reopening culminated in Reggie's exoneration for the 1994 murder. Although his actions in the subsequent incident resulted in a reduced sentence, the years already spent in confinement were considered, leaving him with a short time to serve. Released in 2009 after 16 years, Reggie's struggle for justice continued until 2017 when Los Angeles awarded him $5.2 million in compensation. While no sum could fully rectify the injustices endured, this financial security offered a new beginning.